You want to do any introductions and tell them about the muting?
Yeah, so happy Friday, everyone. My name is Topher. I'm the program assistant for JSPAC. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to mute all the participants so we don't get any background noise that kind of distracts from today's webinar. If you want to hop in and have a question or want to make a comment, I believe what you can do is unmute yourself by pressing *6. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Elizabeth, and I'm going to mute everyone right now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Am I muted? Yes. You could hear me? Okay. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us on this lovely Friday afternoon. Well, it's lovely where I am. I hope it's lovely where you are. So we're going to talk about social media in the classroom, pros and cons, and we'll go from there. It's a big topic. It's an interesting topic. So there's a lot to be said. So first, here is my bio and a little bit about Tony, who is not actually here. We should probably have Topher up here instead, or in addition to. Topher, get on that. But if you, I've been working with JSPAC for 17, well actually probably 19 years now. It's been a while since I changed that. And Tony's been running programs for, I don't even know how long, but forever. And has a real eye for moving things forward and making sure things are not done business as usual. But like, why are we doing this? Let's start there. So, the Special Populations Advisory Committee, or JSPAC as we call it, the web address is www.jspac.org. It's actually down at the bottom of each slide, so yeah, if you forget. I think Topher will be putting this PowerPoint up on the website at some point. But our mission is to promote equity and success across CTE programs in K-12, adult education, and community colleges. And we do that by doing things like this, professional development. We do webinars, we do in-person workshops, and we also put on a conference each year in Sacramento. And it is the first Thursday and Friday of the first week of December, or I guess it's the Thursday and Friday following Thanksgiving. Probably a better way to say it, because this year it's actually November 1st and November 30th and December 1st, so weird dates. We also, when we identify instructional strategies that we think are great or that would be good for helping CTE teachers and educators help their students be successful and overcome barriers, we'll promote those, and then we also develop and find resources which are on our webpage. Oops, I keep trying to go forward. So on our webpage we have quite a lot of different brochures, things like what is special populations in general, how does CTE play into California's economy, what is it about CTE and special populations, the nexus between those two, things like that. We also have a series of e-seminars that are really pretty great. They are all under 16 minutes, and they can be used in, there's one on counseling for counselors. There's one called Internal Barriers, which I think is fabulous. We developed it for educators, but we've ended up using it a lot for students. And sort of turns out that once the students hear and understand the internal barriers like micromessages or self-efficacy, things like that, they can't really unlearn it, and it really impacts the way that they move forward and the actions and the reactions, the actions they take and the reactions that they have. So there's a whole series of them. There's 6 of them. And you can play them during faculty meetings, or somebody mentioned in-service, I think. So in-service orientations, things like that, they're fabulous. And again, they're 15 minutes. They're also great if you're a teacher and you want to, you have to get something done in your classroom, you need 15 minutes. You can play this for the students. They really benefit, and you get the 15 minutes that you needed. So they're great. We also have links from all over the state of California and the nation into everything from different things that special population students face all the way down to data and everything in between. We are in the middle, or hopefully, I don't know exactly what part of the process we're in, but we're developing a new website, so things might be a little bit wonky right now. Our website's fairly old, and in the world of technology, old is definitely not good. And then we do a lot of professional development activities, again, like this, like the workshops that we do regionally. If you want a workshop in your area, then you can let us know on a whole host of different topics: Special Populations 101, internal barriers, how to use data to improve programs, all sorts of different things that we work on. Okay. Any questions or comments? You can also, if you don't want to unmute yourself, you can type questions into the chat room, and Topher and I will be watching them to make sure that we're as cognizant as we are of your questions. Okay, so our next conference, like I said, is November 30th to December 1st, 2007, and the pre-conferences are on November 29th. It will be in Sacramento at the Holiday Inn. And I think it's going to be an amazing, amazing conference. It's all about, it's called What's Your Frame, and I forgot the second half of that title, but I apologize. But it's all about changing the way that you see the world. So we're so used to, I am a single female, work in equity, yada yada. This is the way that I look at the world. I was raised up in the mountains of Colorado. I have just particular parameters and biases and things like that. And this conference is all about how do we step away from what we really think we are, or the way that we normally look at things, and look at things in a more equitable, or I guess just equitable manner, and see students for who they are, not who we perceive them to be. I guess that's kind of the biggest point. And then how do we teach to that? Yeah. Okay, so we also work with the California Community College Special Populations Collaborative. There's their link. They have a whole host of different brochures. I call them cheat sheets. They call them brochures. So if you wanted to work with special population students, what is it that's been done? What can I, instead of recreating the wheel, you can go to this website, look at the brochures, and really look. And there's more than this, but they don't all fit onto the page anymore. And then how to use core indicators to track the successes in special populations and CTE. And those of you in the community colleges, what's your frame? Achieving equity and access through CTE. Thanks, Topher. I lost my train of thought. Oh, for those of you who are in the community college system, we have the new launch board system, which will work in conjunction with the core indicators, so you can really track the success and gaps in your student outcomes. I think it's going to be a really exciting time to be working in the field of education, and so we can really see where we're doing well and where we can tighten things up a bit. They also do lots of core indicator reports. They promote effective practices, all sorts of different things. So you can go there and get in contact with Lori Harrison, who would be that person who is in charge of that organization. Okay, so any questions or anything about JSPAC in and of itself? Okay, so social media in the classroom and everywhere else. Social media, social networking, I'm just calling it social media, but I've also abbreviated SM/N in some places, because some of the research talks about social media, some talks about social networking, some talk about both. So I became aware of social media and both its pros and cons by becoming the mother of a teenager. I don't know about how many of you all have teenagers or even middle schoolers now who have cell phones and are somewhat attached to at the hip to that thing, to their phone or their laptop or their tablet or whatever it is. It's a pretty it was a pretty shocking thing for me. And I wish I had done this research prior to raising my son. But, so then after that, my son is now 21, so it's been a while. But after that, at a conference, after our conference in December in Sacramento, I was talking to a teacher, a counselor about her husband. Is Susie Hushley on the call? No. About their perception of very young students and the idea that these kids are coming in with all sorts of technology deficits and addictions, and that they're actually literally going through withdrawals when they're sitting in class and they're not being able to, gain whatever it is that they gain from technology, etc. And then from that conversation came the idea of saying, okay, so what is it that we're going to do, and what works and what doesn't work, and that's sort of how this webinar was built. And so then we started doing research, and there's a lot of research out there, a whole lot of research, and there's more being done every day. However, before we go there, so this I thought was pretty crazy statistics on how many social networking sites are the top news source for Americans, and then how much time, this is in 1 month, the second bullet. In January of 2012, Americans spent 121.1 billion minutes on social networking sites. So I had to do a little bit of math, and I think I'm right. There's 313 million people in America, so I divided 121 billion by 313, comes out to 2.018 billion hours, or seven hours for every man, woman, and child. In America, 7 hours. And that's in 1 month. I was thinking, well, that's not that much, except when you consider the vast number of people, lots of older people, lots of very young children, et cetera, who don't have it. My dad, people like that, the Luddites of us all. So we spend an enormous amount of time on social media. So it's not an issue that is necessarily confined to our classrooms, right? Where folks are compulsorily engaging with their technology and social media apps. That was just crazy to me. I put this link down here because there's a bunch of other statistics that were kind of shocking, kinds of things, but I didn't want to put it onto the PowerPoint because some of them were like really kind of racy. Wow. Okay. So research, it turns out, is not always helpful. So the green is good, the red is bad, what we want to stop, what we want to go. And, frequently research shows that it can make socially awkward kids feel better about communicating. It can make them feel more connected. It's a good study aid. It's a great way to communicate with parents. It facilitates collaboration in the classroom and on homework and things like that. And it's instantaneous assistance with homework or so on and so forth. The flip side of all of that is that it also creates distance between humans. They have less face-to-face interaction, they have less vulnerability in those interactions, and the younger people are actually losing the ability to interact in person. I'm going to talk later about a guy named Simon. NBC, you said, I believe it. What do you believe? Oh, the 121 billion minutes? Frightening. I'm guessing that's what you believe. It shocks me. Anyway, Simon was talking about how, he talks about addiction and so on and so forth. And he says, if you get up in the morning and you go and you check your Facebook page before you greet your partner or spouse, you might have a problem there. And I know so many people who have their phones attached to their, to them, it's next to them on their bedside table, because a lot of us use them as alarm clocks, but then we also get into those bad habits of checking Facebook page, reading Twitter, whatever, before we get up, or if we wake in the middle of the night, whatever. Heavy social media users have lower grades. So it's good for school, but it's also really bad for school, for students. It helps with communication between parents, but I think it also gives parents a little bit more helicopter time and ability than they really need. I was supposed to be a classroom teacher, and I didn't, because it turns out that I don't have much of a filter when it comes to, saying things delicately, and parents are nuts. I don't know what's up with them, but this whole idea of, well, we'll talk about it more later, but about the entitlement and the getting kids into classes that they don't necessarily belong in just drove me out of teaching. So I think helicopter parents do not need any encouragement, and so that's a problem. And then the bottom one, instant help. Well, who's giving the help? If it's another student and they're just as confused, maybe it did not really help. But if it's a reliable source or what have you, then it can be super beneficial. Okay, so positive social media use in classrooms and schools, and we're going to talk about each or some of these more in depth. But the most often cited were collaboration, and I think that's important. I think it's important as much for the fact that we need it in the classrooms as it is for the fact that we need it on jobs. And it's one of the soft skills that employers are really looking for. In fact, one of the e-seminars that I mentioned earlier is on soft skills, and this, I think, ties really closely, this whole idea of social media, social networking, and soft skills. So I think it's important. Homework help, as long as it's well done. Encourage the participation, again, of shy students or socially insecure students. Parents, teachers, and students all have the same information. I cannot tell you how many times with that monster of mine I would say, are you done with all your homework? Are you missing any assignments? Are you, oh no, I'm good, everything's fine. And then I would find out that he has, 19 missing assignments. True story, actually. And 17 of them were in his backpack. So it allows that sort of instantaneous, oh yeah, I can check and see you're not there. Resource sharing, again, good resources, we'll talk about that. I do think that the millennial generation is the most, oh, Ty says, what's a helicopter parent? I'll go back to that in just a second. Let me finish this part. Develop compassion, global understanding. I think that the millennials are the most engaged globally than any other generation because of social media and social networking, and I think that they have a greater sense of wanting to improve the world or have a positive impact in the world because of this. I was clueless when I was a kid. We didn't, I lived up in the mountains. We didn't even have a television until I was 17. I had no idea what was going on. MBC says, I know it to be a parent who hovers constantly around their child. They're overly involved and concerned with running everyday things kids should be responsible for. Yep, that's pretty much it. They get their kids into honors classes or onto sports teams that they didn't necessarily earn. They are constantly engaged. There are parents, there's a report that I read not very long ago about the sheer number of parents, mostly mothers, but parents who go to their college, to the college that their students are attending and clean their dorm rooms and do their laundry and stock their refrigerators and whatever else they can do. I mean, they just really don't stop parenting even though their child has kind of left home. Those same parents are at the lower grades in the classroom all the time, are overly engaged in making sure that their students get their work done, but also that they get a slide a little bit around things that maybe, Jane earned a C, but really needs a B+ in order to maintain her GPA. So mom or the helicopter parent goes in there and convinces the teacher to give Jane a B+, even though she earned a C. So things like that, and it's very destructive. There's tons and tons of research about it, yeah, it's not such a good thing. Okay, so I think that support groups in social media would be amazing. We'll talk about that. It can encourage social and political change, reduce a sense of isolation, and then sharing resources and research links. Okay, the negative, of course, bullying, cheating. less time learning and more time looking it up. So don't just memorize it, just look it up, and that's not a very good way to learn. It creates isolation. Fake news and incorrect information is a huge issue, something that we've all become far too aware of in the last election cycle. It's a form of addiction, distraction, improper use, and then posting things that just never go away. And I think that students of all ages are really not cognizant of just how this works and how important it really can be with employers and colleges, with younger students as they go into college, and then as they get older, as they head out into the work world. What's out there is out there, and it's staying out there. Okay, so better in school. Students who are engaged in social media frequently do better in school, or they can be better in school. 59% of the students with social networking talk about education on social networking. However, the research didn't say what they were talking about, so one can only hope that they were talking well about it. And then 50% say that they use social media or social networking to talk about homework assignments, which I think, done well, is exactly what we want, right? We want them to discuss a topic or to share information or things like that. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in different ways, so keep that in mind. But homework assignments is a perfect way to get students engaged on social media, which they're going to do anyway, but in a positive manner. And then we've already talked about the parents are more engaged, so I'm going to skip that part. And then I think that done well, again, more students can find more diverse resources, and also they can get references and point themselves into directions that they maybe would not have found if they went to the library and was looking at books and things like that. Or like me, the world, like, what is it, the World Book? The Yearbook, World Yearbook, something like that. Anyway, so I think there's a lot of positives in social media, as long as we do it well. So the first really big topic is collaboration. And one of the things that comes from out of the world of self-efficacy is the idea that if you know a topic and you can teach it, then you develop mastery of that topic. And that's a really good thing because it builds a student's self-confidence, builds their self-efficacy, of course. It cements the learning really well. So some of the ways that folks are using it is asking students to use Twitter to explain the topic to each other, to the other students, in 140 characters or less. If you can do that on almost anything, if you can get a teenager to use 140 characters to explain, I don't know, any academic topic, that's pretty impressive. And it also will bring their writing into a more concise, it will make it more concise, which I think is really important. Because if most kids are like my kids, they are a little bit rambling in their sentences. I don't know where they got that. Anyway, so, and if you can do it in 140 characters, then it shows that you really understand the topic, and you can go back, of course in Twitter they can go back and forth, ask questions, go, what have you. Another way is setting up a Facebook page for historical figures or literary figures, and having students build that page to really have that either historical period or literary character come to life and show how well they actually know the material at that point. Do you all have any other ideas, or are you using social media in your classrooms that you want to share?
Me?
Anyone?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. All right. Well, if you all come up with something, then just let us know. Put your hand up. Say something. Unmute yourself. Whatever. So I also really think that group projects, which of course group projects are one of the things that everybody hates, because there's always one or two students who just don't do anything, and you know, they just find that they find the group that there's one person who's a total control freak and does everything, and then there's other ones that sort of skirt, and then, you know, so on and so forth. If it's on a social media site, your contributions are tracked. Who posted what idea, who did what, so on and so forth. You know, all of that is there. So I think it's easier. I also think that it really allows for easier group projects for students who either live far away or, you know, have to work at different, you know, if they're low income, they can come in after work and work on this project that everybody's doing together. Scheduling is difficult when, you know, there's 5 or 6 students working on a project. And that happened when I was in college, it happened when I was in high school, it happened all the time. So I think that it really is a great way to just bring everything sort of onto a level playing field in terms of collaboration. Okay, social interaction. So we all know those students who sit in the back of the room or the front of the room and never really feel comfortable participating. If they can begin that participation through Twitter or another social media platform, then they can perhaps build up the idea that it's a safe place to go and have a conversation. If they don't get attacked or bullied, and of course this requires us as educators to be listening in on the Twitter feeds that our students are participating in. So we can't allow them to just go, particularly younger students, high school, early college, we can't really allow them to just go off willy-nilly and not be paying attention. So if there is cyberbullying or what have you going on, or somebody just says something even you know, somewhat simple like, yeah, no, that's not right, it could completely shut down students who may be feeling insecure anyway, right? And then Facebook pages for classrooms. You know, you have Autotech 101. You set up a Facebook page for that, and they can facilitate different conversations on a specific topic, which is the best to use. I know nothing about auto mechanics. I shouldn't have picked that one. So they can have a debate about which products to use or which is the best way to do, you know, complete an assignment or whatever it is. So I think that's really an important piece. They can also, in both Twitter and Facebook, they can go out and say they are in automotive, let's say. They can go out and meet some folks, some mechanics who are working in the field, and invite them to participate as well on Twitter or Facebook. And or you can, depending on how old the students are. And so that they get some real-world collaboration with actual working auto mechanics or wood shop carpenters or whatever the situation may be, computer information engineers, whatever it is. And they can really start developing relationships outside of school that will feed them and fuel them once they graduate. And I think it's really beneficial, but it's also a really safe way to do it for a school, but also inexpensive. So I think that's another huge benefit to incorporate your business partners. Hopefully you all have a CTE advisory council. So get those folks around there. Okay, and then of course you can also have students from around the world, which makes your students more global citizens, but it also gives your students perspective on how is it that they do computer information science in Dubai? How do they do woodworking in Morocco? How do they do automotive in... my father happens to be from Austria, and carpentry is a very, very different animal in Austria than it is here. The schooling behind it is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So really a different kind of thing. So gaining an awareness of that, I think, is really beneficial for all students. Okay, so one of the things that as equity specialists we encourage is schools setting up and facilitating support groups or study groups, particularly for students who are in the special population groups, subcategories, subgroups, which would be non-traditional, disabilities, single parents, low income, including foster kids, who I didn't list on here, displaced homemakers, ESL. I also added veterans and incarcerated students, because all of these groups, sometimes you're not going to have 7 non-traditional students on your campus who want to participate in a support group or a study group, and yet it makes it so much easier. And there's ample evidence that suggests that a student who has that kind of support, either through a formal or informal fashion, they do better in school. They stay in school. They try harder. They're encouraged more, so on and so forth. So it would be really easy to have a non-traditional student's Facebook page for your school, for your class. You're an automotive instructor, you're a CIS, you're an engineer, what have you. Set up a Facebook page that is, invitation only, that you're moderating it, and your students can really find a lot of support from one another. And this can also be both up and down the pipeline for K-12, community college, adult education. You can include middle school, and again, you can include business partners who can offer support and guidance as well. And that can, of course, be around the whole community, around the state, around the nation, around the world, what have you, on all of these different groups. Or you can combine them. If you just have one support group for special population students for pre-engineering, that might work, depending on what it is. Veterans, I included them because of 2 things. One, I think they're an important group, but more importantly, or more to the point, I'm pretty sure that when Perkins 5 is finally reauthorized, which could be today, could be tomorrow, could be next year, who knows, I think that veterans will be included in the definition of special populations. And so we all sort of need to start thinking, like, how are we serving the veteran students, and then what is it that we can be doing better. And then incarcerated students, I included them, even though it would be difficult because they have very limited access to computers. I think it would really benefit them by engaging with students who are studying a program that they're studying, and so they could find peer support and so on and so forth. So I think it'll be really great. I'm just not entirely positive that all students who are incarcerated could participate based on their media ban. Okay, depends on the age and severity. Okay, so resources and research, again, double-edged sword, right? You can get a lot more access to different resources. Oops. I need that. Okay. You can get more resources. You can find multiple sources in a single bound. You can go on, find one report that that speaks to what you're looking at, and then go to the end of it and look at, the sources cited and find another 12. They can be shared on social media accounts. So if you have 30 students who are doing research, they can share their different resources. They can work together on that. So you go find them on this, you go find them on that aspect, you go find them on this aspect. Things like that. If you're doing anything about social change or social engagement or civics or anything like that, political parties, almost all of the candidates, organizations, etc. have social media accounts. But so do different CTE organizations. So they have them as well. And again, you can reach out to those organizations and get help with them with their social media accounts so that they can help you moderate and you guide the students. However, again, fake news, is it real or is it not so real? we're going to talk about this more, but I wanted to put in a couple of resources because I think it's really critical. You know, we've been talking over the last, I don't know, 6 or 8 months about fake news. It's been all over. But I think when you again change your frame and look at it not as fake news but fake resources or insufficiently researched resources, that's where we can change. You know, we can just switch a little bit and look at that from the perspective of education. So I think it would be really easy to, in looking at the things that they have, to say, okay, is this resource real, or is it just kind of somebody's opinion? So the first one is 10 questions from the News Literacy Project. And I wonder if it'll open if I click on it. No, I think I have a screenshot of it later. And then teaching kids how to start a newspaper. It's a series of lesson plans, and I don't think that it has to be young children at all. I personally thought it would be great for, you know, an English program or pretty much anything, really. But how do you go about finding out, following up, and what do you have to do, and so on and so forth. And they had some really good stuff on learning to critique the media and spot fake news. And the same thing, again, applies to resources and research. And I will say that in the hundreds of articles that I read for this, or looked at least, I did not go through each one and scrutinize every single resource that was in there, but I do always check before I even begin reading that there are sources listed. Because if there's no source listed, then it's just literally somebody's opinion, and needs to do a little bit better than that. So that's my criteria. Okay, so the other articles in the series on teaching kids how to learning to critique the media and spot fake news are understanding the fundamentals of media, which I think is really important because, again, it's what our students are so engaged in media through social networking, through social media, that they take it as face value. And we have to start saying, you know, okay, is this an opinion, or is it fact? Is it what have you? The elements of a news story, are there both sides? Is it opinion? So on and so forth. And then learning to write, again, bringing it down into something that's concise, I think is really important. And then learning to research and identify sources of information, I think, was great. So I really like this whole series. Okay. Any questions, comments? Oh, here's something about veterans, and sorry about that, Fred. Hi. Those who were previously incarcerated, many of which are veterans, should be included in the definition. Oh, absolutely. Part of their reintegration to CTE training. Thank you for that. Yeah, incarcerated and previously incarcerated. Yeah, and it's a big ball of wax. There's a whole bunch of it, from very young to not quite as young. Thank you, Fred. Okay. So any questions or comments about this? So this was an image that I found on this website here. And it was talking about fake news and how do you identify it and so on and so forth. And over here on the left is, you know, very liberal, and over here on the right is conservative and sensational to complex up here at the top. And then they sort of place the news or news-ish agencies throughout. And then immediately following this article, this was an article that completely lambasted and said it's biased. So again, you have to really start thinking about it. And then once I saw who that article was written by, I was like, oh, well, there we are. They're a very right-wing conservative group. So it's like, yeah, everything has a bias to it right now. Our media is not particularly open-minded. So anyway, I thought it was a good thing. I think this would be a really good image to talk about in school, regardless of what the age of the students are and regardless of who the students are, whether they're CTE students, whether they're academic students, whether they're, I don't care what it is. Because again, we need to have engaged citizens as well as good employees and good students. Okay, so the not so happy part. So cyberbullying is something that, of course, we hear all the time. It's not just in grade schools anymore because we have this amazing thing of sitting behind a screen and being able to say anything we want to and really not having any accountability for it, which is just extraordinary. So I think we need to be paying attention to it, whether we're at a college level or at a high school or middle school or even or adult ed level, and making sure that that doesn't happen, that bullying doesn't happen. In order to preemptively stop it, I think we really need to start teaching ethics and values and accountability and compassion and putting ourselves in other people's shoes and just really being cognizant and helping students understand that they may not be, you may not be able to see the person because of that screen that you're behind, but almost inevitably, comments that I see at the end of articles or on Facebook or what have you, when they're really sort of nasty comments, the person's name is there. You can click on it and go see their Facebook posting. So they're anonymous, but not really. And so they need to be made aware that there's a level of responsibility in society. And again, I think that we can teach this in a school, what have you. I think we need to talk to students about the intent of words. I see frequently in social media, on comments, somebody will make a comment that really can be taken in 4 different ways, let's say. And one person, the next person to read it or what have you, to comment on their comment, just took it in a way that, was the most far-reaching way that you could possibly take it. And it is misinterpreted, and it just goes from there, and it becomes, it just sort of takes on a life of its own. And those comments, even though they feel innocuous, they feel like they're behind a screen. We don't have to really worry about them. They're not really here. There's, it's just a comment on Facebook or on whatever, Reddit. They are doing a lot of damage to people of all ages. We're seeing higher suicide rates. We're seeing much greater rates of depression. We're seeing, all the stuff that these kinds of comments really play into, mess with our mental health. So the good part is that if we have students who are being bullied, or if we have taught this well, and we've taught them to withstand the cyberbullying, to understand it, to put it in its place, to recognize that it's somebody else's opinion, not them, this actually, it can, in the long run, can result in resilience, in building a student's resilience, which I did not really think about, but I think it's really true. After doing the research, it was just really shocking how many researchers say this, that bullying is horrible while it's going on. But if it's handled well in terms of how do I deal with it, where do I put it, unpacking it, so to speak, I hate that term, but it's appropriate here, then it really does build resilience, and it allows students to persevere in school, in employment, in a training program, whatever it is. So it can be somewhat good. Listening to the student, most of the victims say that's the #1 thing. They want to be heard, they want to be validated that this just sucks, and there's no 2 ways about it, and there's nothing that they did or said that brought this on, so on and so forth. Sometimes students will report bullying, and they'll only report one side of it. And that's not to say that they don't feel bullied. It's not to say that their interpretation is incorrect, but it is to say that sometimes it's incomplete, and sometimes it is, again, interpretation, an issue of interpretation. And so as a parent or an educator, we need to really be cognizant that we're looking at all sides of the story, and we're taking that into account in a classroom setting. Because technology is not going away. It's just, it's here. So we're going to have to learn to deal with it. And, it would have been nice if our parents had, the parents, had taught our students all about social media, but they didn't really actually have it. And I hear this all the time when we talk about soft skills. It's, well, this is all stuff the parents should have taught. Well, that could be true, but it didn't happen, so we need to actually just move on. And the schools, which of course you all have 712 hats, this is just one more of the hat. One more hat that we need to teach about social media. So I've provided a lot of different resources throughout on teaching social media, but also here, of course, it's all about cyberbullying, stopping and dealing with cyberbullying. Okay, any questions or comments or so on and so forth? Okay, so cheating, of course, comes up a lot. It's a universal problem that has been going on since, I'm guessing, since we wrote with chalk and slates. In a study in San Francisco, 85% of students have phones, and 35% admitted to cheating with their phones. So I'm guessing it's a little higher than 35% if that's just the ones that were admitting it. So it is definitely an issue. Students are sending out, they're on Twitter, some of the questions. They're taking photographs and then posting it to Instagram or Pinterest or Facebook or wherever else. They are taking pictures and just passing them amongst their friends, texting them to their friends, so on and so forth. So, it is definitely an issue. However, and this actually came up in the research, but it also came up when I had an intern who was, or is, a programmer. And he works in a world of open source material. And what is cheating is changing. It's certainly changed for him. And that has made it sort of difficult for him to say, to even recognize when he's plagiarizing or when he is, plagiarizing mostly, but or cheating. Because something starts out written by Fred, and then Josie comes on and she adds something to it, and then NBC adds something to it, and then I do, and then Topher does, and whose writing is it actually at this point? And it becomes sort of a gray area. And then if we ask students, say, okay, collaborate here, collaborate on Facebook, collaborate on Google Docs, collaborate there, and then they all turn in papers or homework assignments or what have you that are sort of unoriginal. At what point is that cheating? So I think we have to be really clear. In ourselves, we have to really define what is cheating for us. I mean, obviously, copy and paste portions out of a text, that's cheating. But, beyond that, what is it that's being cheating? And then something that I really actually didn't know, and I said, I guess I should have known. There are actual lessons on how to cheat using your cell phone online. There's a lot of them. It's extraordinary. Did not actually get that. Then again, you can make pretty much, figure out how to do pretty much anything by looking online, so I guess it makes sense. So I put them on there because I think it's important for you all to realize that this is the way students, if cheating isn't a part of your educational world, then you should understand how they're being used to cheat. They're also cheating with calculators. I was never very good at math. Didn't have any of those fancy calculators. So the last one was the graphing calculator method. Blew my mind. It was really amazing. Didn't know anything about that. Okay, so this is where I was talking earlier about things are up there and they just don't go away. The number of employers doing a background check before hiring and will do a social media check has increased over the last decade 500%. In the beginning it was like 500%, that's crazy. But we haven't even had this for that long. So I was like, okay, well of course it's increased 500%. But what I was surprised is, it went up 60% in the last year. It's crazy. And that how many, 25% of employees found content online that either made them not hire the student or the employer, reprimand them, fire them, what have you. And it's absolutely shocking to me. We recently, with another organization that I work with, we hired a new administrative assistant. And everyone said, well, are you going to check their references? And I'm like, no. And they're like, oh my God, why? Because who's going to give you a bad reference? But I did Google all their names. And I did do a social media Google, just a quick check on each of them. And I was surprised at some things I found. It didn't end up influencing anything that we had, that the hiring committee had decided, but I can absolutely see how it could have. Absolutely. College admissions, so for younger students or students that are transferring from a community college to a four-year, 40% of college admissions say they check social media, and 29% say they just simply Google the student's name. There are ways to increase the positive outcomes on Google, so we could teach students about that if that is something that they could benefit from. But I think that students really need to understand that, what they put up there is it's not coming back down. And they have to really, I remember saying it to my son and my nieces and nephews, and we still had an awful lot of beer shots when they were 17 or 18 or something. I was like, you guys are just crazy. Anyway, there's also, and I included this article because there's positive ways to do it, to influence your college application. There are websites that are specifically set up for that. So if you are going to, if you're transferring in as a fine art major, you can actually go in, create this website, and put all of some of your material up there. You can put videos up there. You can put awards up there. That was one of the things that was often stated was if a student claims they had won an award, a particular one that was somewhat prestigious, that's when they will absolutely check, because that would be online, either in the local news story or something like that, things like that. So these decisions, both at an employment level as well as a college admissions level, are being influenced greatly by what's up there and equally what's not up there, if there's any untruths or lies being reported. Okay, so now what? After all of that, I was sort of left with the idea that there's not really any consensus. It just doesn't make any difference. There's good, there's bad. Like in almost everything else, there's positives and negatives to social media. It's when it becomes an addiction that it becomes a problem. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Simon, who I already mentioned. He has some really good information about how it's an addiction, how that sort of comes up, what it does, and what it means. We spend, we being Pick Royally, not you and I, we post a comment or a story on Reddit or Facebook, or post a picture to Instagram, or what have you, to make a comment on Twitter. And then we obsess over it to see if there's people liked it or what have you. And this, for the younger people, is significantly more important. We send a text to people, and then if they haven't responded in an hour, we're pretty sure they're mad at us. We frequently have young people have absolutely lost the ability to reach out over the phone or in person. Just go knock on the door and say, hey, let's go do X, Y, or Z, or what have you. You want to go for on a date? Fred, I see you. That's a good question. Usually pictures are attached to the profile, but not all the times, most times seemingly pictures. Not sure what that means. I wonder if college admission office do any kind of response filtering of social media when they check. They might be looking at the wrong. Absolutely. That is absolutely true. One of the applications that I did find images of the person, this young person did not have a shirt on. So that was kind of a surprise. But I did verify that it was her. And there are almost always pictures attached. So yeah, absolutely. If your name is, common, that could be a problem. Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe they should cultivate positive feedback on social media and include it in their college application. Anyway, so we all are sort of addicted, and this is absolutely not something that is held to the younger generation. I mean, I know that you all can think of going to restaurants and watching two people sit there and text while, other people or read Facebook or whatever they're doing instead of talking to one another. And a lot of that, we have lost the ability to be vulnerable. And if you have not ever heard of Brené Brown, I was trying to get an accent over the final E in her name, but she's a researcher, and she does research around vulnerability and shame and things like that. She's amazing. I highly recommend it. That's a link when it's posted. Otherwise, you can Google her name. She does TED Talks. It actually becomes an addiction because dopamine, when we get that response, when we get a text or some sort of notification, a shot of dopamine actually is released in our body, and we become addicted to it. It's the same as gambling, drinking, drug use, any other addiction that people engage with. It's all about the dopamine. So this is the same thing. So it's not that social media is good or bad. It's how we dealt with it. So Simon Sinek, again, you can Google him. He talks about that millennials primarily were raised with instant gratification, participation trophies, and what that has led them to is missing job fulfillment, persistence, effort. If they haven't found their way, quote unquote, in 8 weeks, and they're like, oh, I'm just not in the right career, or what have you. And it's a problem. It really has slowed students down. It's an addiction when we can't go to dinner without our phones. When we had a speaker, it's the third bullet, but at last year's conference who walked off the stage and looked at me and he just sort of shook his head, and I'm like, hey, what's wrong? And he said, standing up on stage, the sheer number of people that were on their phones while he was speaking just made him feel like walking out. And the message that it sends when we can't go to dinner, when we have our phone, when we're on a dinner date, whatever, at meetings, is that we don't matter. And I think we really need to be cognizant of that as teachers. Are we showing that to our students? We only have 1 minute. I apologize. So this is a great YouTube video. I would highly recommend showing your students and watching it yourself. And I put a couple of different things in there that I thought were really interesting. Okay, here's more of his stuff. He has 10 rules for success. It's a great list. It's a great explanation. He goes into each one, breaks them all down. But it also, the end result is that one piece of research shows that freshmen spend 2 hours a day, and it negatively, this is at a four-year college, it negatively affects their grades. For juniors and sophomores, it's only, the time is reduced and their GPA is not affected unless they're trying to study through social media entirely. And then by senior year, it's kicked in and they figured it out. However, 40% of all college students drop out in or after their first year of college. And if the student is staying on their Facebook for 2 hours a day and it's reducing their feeling of isolation, maybe again, that's another piece of balance that we need to really think about. Okay. I'm not going to read this to you, but we need to be teaching responsible technology. And there's this whole long article, and we need to include this piece as part of a mental health program, a comprehensive mental health program. We also need to teach self-respect, global responsibility, and all these kinds of things. And all of these things that we talked about earlier, self-efficacy, time management, all of those could be part of the same thing, and it would ward off addictions to alcohol, gambling, technology, what have you, and reduce the bullying. Okay, here's a lesson plan on a student's guide for using media safely. Here is fake news. It's not just fake news. I love this because Pope Francis shocks the world, endorses Donald Trump for president. Not real news. And yet, the vast majority of you can see that was shared 960,000 times. So before anybody figured out it was not real. Here's the screenshot of the 10 questions for fake news detection. And again, this can be not just fake news, but fake resources and references. I think all of this is part of the whole idea about critical thinking, which circles back to employment and being a successful employee. So it's much bigger than just teaching our kids how to be that critical thinkers and smart on social media when they're in school. Okay, so to sum it up, there's no consensus. It's not that social media is the problem, it's the addiction. And we need to talk to our students about all of it. And that the end result should be a good mental health plan in all schools to ward against students becoming addicted to or tuned out from life in general in a whole host of different areas. Okay, and then in no order, a whole slew of different resources, different research, different lesson plans, so on and so forth. There's another page of them. Pros and cons in the classroom. Okay, any questions? Okay, I apologize for running 2 minutes over. We do have an evaluation survey, which Topher will send out, but here is also a link to it. And I will hope to see you at another webinar, and then also at the conference in November, December. Thank you so much. Any questions?